Invite everyone, as many as 30 people. My mother-in-law was cooking all day anyway, and it is not like she has anything better to do. Chloe's voice cut through the kitchen walls like a whip. She was talking on the phone, her voice so loud she seemed to want the entire neighborhood to hear her. My hands froze over the dough I was preparing for the appetizers. And then I heard my own son, my Julian, the boy I carried in my womb, the one I nursed and raised alone after his father abandoned us, complete the humiliation with words I never imagined would come out of his mouth. He said that I should earn the food I eat. Those 7 words destroyed 40 years of devotion in a single second. I looked down at the stained apron I was wearing, the pots boiling on the stove, the 30 pounds of meat I had been preparing since 5 o'clock in the morning, the chopped vegetables, the sauces, and the desserts chilling in the refrigerator. It was all for a party I did not even know was happening. It was all because my daughter-in-law decided I was her personal employee, her servant, someone without a life of her own, or any dignity. In the silence of that kitchen, something inside me broke. It was not a dramatic break. I did not scream, and I did not cry. It was something cold, calculated, and final. I took off my apron with slow, almost ceremonial movements. I folded it carefully and left it on the kitchen island. I walked toward the stove where 3 enormous pots were bubbling with the feast I had spent hours preparing. The scent of spices filled the air: cumin, oregano, roasted garlic, and chili powder. I turned every knob to the left. Click, click, click. The flames died out one by one. The silence that followed was deafening. Chloe was still in the living room, laughing with that high-pitched laugh that had tormented me for the last 3 years, ever since Julian brought her to live in my house. My house. The home I bought with the money I earned back when I was still the renowned chef Julia Mendez, when my name appeared in culinary magazines and people made reservations 2 months in advance just to taste my creations. I grabbed my purse from the hook by the back door, that old leather bag I had bought in better times. Inside were my documents, my identification, and the bank card I almost never used because Chloe controlled every cent that came into this house. Julian's voice drifted in from the dining room, asking if I was finished with the appetizers yet. He did not even bother to come see me. He just shouted his order like someone calling a dog. I did not answer. I kept walking toward the back door, the one that led to the small garden where I once grew aromatic herbs for my dishes. Now, there was only untended grass and dried plants that no one bothered to water. My fingers touched the cold metal handle. For a moment, just one moment, I hesitated. 40 years of sacrifice flashed before my eyes like a movie on fast forward. I had given up my career when Julian was 5 years old because he needed a mother, not a famous chef who came home at midnight smelling of garlic and wine. I sold my stake in the Hearth, the restaurant I had built with my best friend Eleanor, because Julian needed private school, clothes, doctors, and everything a child deserves. And now, that same boy, now a 38-year-old man, was telling me that I should work for the food I ate in my own home. I opened the door. The fresh afternoon air hit my face. It was 4:30 in the afternoon. The guests would arrive at 7 o'clock. In 2.5 hours, 30 people would be knocking on the door expecting a banquet that would never exist. I closed the door behind me with a soft, almost delicate click. No one saw me leave. No one heard me go. I walked down the side path to the street, my shoes crunching on the dry leaves. The October sun painted everything in shades of orange and gold. These warm colors had always seemed beautiful to me, but now they felt ironic, almost mocking. I pulled my phone from my purse. I had 3 contacts marked as favorites. Julian was one of them. I deleted him with a quick tap. The other 2 were Eleanor and Dr. Ramirez, my longtime physician. I dialed Eleanor's number. 3 rings, 4. Julia? Her voice sounded surprised. We had not spoken in 6 months. Chloe had decided that my friendships made her uncomfortable, and Julian, as always, had agreed. Eleanor. My voice came out firmer than I expected. I need a place to stay tonight. There was a silence on the other end. Then, with the intuition that only 30 years of friendship can provide, Eleanor asked, "What did they do now?" "I will tell you later. Can I come over?" "Come now. You know where the restaurant is. I will be waiting for you in the second-floor office." I hung up and raised my hand to hail a passing taxi. The driver, an older man with a gray mustache, looked at me through the rearview mirror as I gave him the address. Going downtown? That is a bit of a drive. It will be about $20. Perfect, I replied. I settled into the back seat. For the first time in 3 years, I was spending money on myself without asking anyone for permission. As the taxi moved through the streets, I imagined the scene that would unfold in my house in exactly 2 hours. I saw Chloe walking into the kitchen with that arrogant smile, expecting to find trays full of food. I saw Julian checking that everything was perfect to impress his important friends. I saw them both discovering the empty pots, the cold stove, and the deserted kitchen. For the first time in a long time, I felt something resembling satisfaction. The hearth was still as beautiful as I remembered. The warm lights on the facade, the wide windows where you could see the movement of the diners, and the elegant gold-lettered sign that Eleanor and I had designed together more than 20 years ago. This place had been my dream, my creation, my baby before I had an actual baby. The taxi stopped at the side entrance. I paid the driver $25 and told him to keep the change. I climbed the stairs I knew by heart. The stairs I had climbed thousands of times, carrying crates of vegetables, bottles of wine, and my ambition on my back. Eleanor was waiting at her office door. She was still the same imposing woman of 61 years, with her gray hair cut into a perfect bob, wearing a beige power suit and thick-framed glasses that made her look like a French intellectual. She looked me up and down, evaluating my wrinkled clothes, my unkempt hair, and the dark circles under my eyes that no makeup could hide anymore. "You look terrible," she said bluntly. That was Eleanor. She never sugarcoated anything. "Thank you for taking me in." She pulled me by the arm and led me into the office. The space smelled of fresh coffee and the accounting ledgers she always kept piled on the desk. She gently pushed me toward the green leather sofa by the window, the same sofa where we used to plan menus and dream of opening locations across the country. "Sit down. I am going to get some wine. You look like you need it." I did not argue. I sank into the sofa and closed my eyes. The distant sound of the restaurant kitchen reached me here, the clatter of pans, the voices of chefs coordinating, the constant hum of a successful business. Everything I had left behind. Eleanor returned with a bottle of red wine and 2 glasses. She poured generously and handed me one. "Now, tell me what happened, and do not give me half-truths, Julia. I have known you since you were 30. I took a long sip of the wine. It was an excellent Malbec, probably an $80 bottle. Eleanor never skimped on quality. Chloe invited 30 people to dinner tonight without telling me. She shouted over the phone that I had been cooking all day because I had nothing better to do. I paused, trying to control the tremble in my voice. And Julian said I should work for the food I eat. Eleanor's glass stopped halfway to her lips. Her eyes narrowed behind her glasses. That dangerous look I knew well, the one she gave when a supplier tried to cheat her or an employee let her down. "Repeat that last part." "He said I should work for the food I eat. In my own home, Eleanor. The house I bought with the money I earned working 18 hours a day in this very restaurant." Eleanor set her glass on the desk with a sharp thud. She stood up and began pacing back and forth, her heels clicking against the wooden floor like small hammers. "And what did you do?" "I left everything there. The full pots, the half-prepared food, everything." For the first time that night, Eleanor smiled. It was not a sweet smile. It was sharp, dangerous, the kind that was meant to be feared. "Good. It was about time you woke up." She sat beside me and took my hand. Her fingers were cold from the wine glass, but her grip was firm and steady. "Julia, I have watched you disappear for 3 years. Every time I call, you tell me you cannot go out. Every time I invite you to the restaurant, you make an excuse. You stopped answering my messages. You stopped coming to the culinary school alumni meetings. You vanished from the world as if you never existed." Chloe said my friendships made her uncomfortable, that I spent too much time away from the house. "And Julian?" "Julian always agrees with her. On everything. It is like he does not have a spine of his own." Eleanor let go of my hand and leaned back, looking at the ceiling. "Do you know what the saddest part of all this is? That you allowed it to happen. You, the woman who faced down food critics, who fought with difficult distributors, who built a business from nothing. You let a spoiled 30-year-old girl turn you into her maid." Her words hurt because they were true. Every single one of them. I was afraid of losing Julian. He is my only son, Eleanor. If I stood up to Chloe, he would turn his back on me. Breaking news, darling. He already did. A long time ago. I drank more wine, letting the warm liquid slide down my throat. My phone vibrated inside my bag. I ignored it. That must be Julian, Eleanor said. I bet anything they have already discovered there is no dinner. The guests are about to arrive, and the kitchen is empty. I can only imagine the panic. It vibrated again, and again, and again. You are not going to answer, are they? Eleanor asked. No. Perfect. Because we have a lot to talk about. She got up and went to her desk. She opened a drawer and pulled out a thick manila folder. She dropped it onto the coffee table in front of me with a heavy thud. What is this? Information. 6 months ago, when you stopped answering my calls, I got worried. I hired a private investigator to look into what was going on with you. Do not judge me. I did it because I love you. I opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were photographs, bank statements, and loan records. My name appeared everywhere. Loans I never applied for, debts I never contracted, credit cards opened in my name with balances of over $50,000. What is all this? Your son and your daughter-in-law have been using your personal information to obtain credit. They signed for loans in your name. They opened credit cards using your identity. It all looks legal on the surface because they live in your house and have access to your documents. The room began to spin. I dropped the papers onto the table. How much do I owe? According to the last review, around $230,000. The number hit me like a punch to the stomach. $230,000. A lifetime of work. That cannot be. I check my bank statements. The ones that arrive at your house? Julia, please. Julian works at the bank. He has access to everything. He probably intercepts the mail before you ever see it. My phone would not stop vibrating, call after call, message after message. There is more, Eleanor continued, pulling out another document. Your house, the one you worked so hard to pay off, is in the process of being mortgaged. Julian filed the papers last month. In 3 weeks, if it is approved, the house will have a debt of $300,000. What do they need that much money for? Eleanor showed me more photographs. Julian entering a casino. Chloe leaving luxury boutiques carrying bags from brands that cost thousands of dollars, receipts from incredibly expensive restaurants, trips to resorts, compulsive shopping. They are living like millionaires using your money, your credit, and your estate. I felt like I was going to throw up. All this time, while I cooked, cleaned, washed their clothes, and endured their contempt, they were systematically destroying my financial life, stealing my future, and condemning me to a life of poverty in my old age. Why did you not tell me sooner? I tried. Every time I called, you told me everything was fine. I could not force you to listen. My phone rang again. This time, I looked at the screen. Julian. 12 missed calls, 20 messages. Eleanor took it from my hands and put it on silent. You are staying here tonight. Tomorrow, we go to see my lawyer. And I promise you one thing, Julia. Those two are going to pay back every single cent they stole from you, even if I have to destroy them in the process. For the first time in years, I did not feel alone. The guest room window in Eleanor's apartment looked directly out onto the main street. I stood there for hours, watching the cars pass, the neon lights of nearby restaurants flickering in the dark, while my mind replayed the documents I had seen over and over again. $230,000. My house mortgaged. My financial life ruined by the two people I had trusted most. It was 3 o'clock in the morning when I finally went down to the kitchen. I needed water, air, something to help me process this betrayal. But Eleanor was already there, sitting at the bar with a cup of chamomile tea and her laptop open. I knew you would come down, she said without looking up. Make yourself some tea. It is in the left cabinet. I poured a cup and sat beside her. On the screen were more documents, spreadsheets, and bank information that made my stomach twist with every number I saw. I have been going over everything in more detail, Eleanor explained, turning the laptop toward me. The situation is worse than I thought. But I also found something very interesting, something that can help us a lot. She pointed to a line on the document showing figures in red. Look at this carefully. Julian applied for a loan of $120,000 just 2 months ago. The curious part, the really interesting part, is that in the application he claimed he earns $12,000 a month at the bank. And what is the problem with that? The problem is enormous, Julia. Julian is a junior manager, nothing more. His real salary is $4,200 a month. I verified it personally with my contacts in the bank's human resources department. He lied shamelessly on the loan application. That is not just a small lie. That is federal bank fraud, a serious crime. I felt the air grow heavy, harder to breathe. Are you absolutely sure about that? I have all the proof right here, every document verified, and there is much more, believe me. Chloe opened 3 credit cards in your name in the last 6 months. To do that, she needed your original ID, your full social security number, and your exact date of birth. Not only that, she forged your signature on all the application documents. That is first-degree identity theft, Julia. A serious federal crime. I took a sip of the tea, but it was boiling and burned my tongue. The physical pain was almost a relief compared to the emotional pain piercing my chest. Eleanor, tell me exactly what all this means in legal terms. I need to understand. Eleanor took off her glasses and cleaned them with a silk handkerchief, a gesture she always made when she was about to say something very important. It means they did not just steal money, Julia. They committed serious federal crimes. Bank fraud, identity theft, forgery of official documents. If we handle this correctly, with intelligence and strategy, you do not just get back every cent they stole, they will face legal consequences that will change their lives completely. We are talking about potential prison time. He is my son, I whispered, feeling the words choke me. And you are his mother, the woman who sacrificed a brilliant career, a successful business, and her entire life to give him everything. And this is how he pays you? By robbing you, humiliating you, and treating you like trash? Julia, listen to me well. Blood does not justify abuse. Family is no excuse for mistreatment. It is time you understood that once and for all. My phone, which I had left on the kitchen counter, lit up again. The constant hum of messages had continued for hours without stopping for a single second. I had been ignoring them all night, but now curiosity was eating at me. I needed to know what was happening at my house, how that disastrous night had ended. I unlocked the screen with fingers that trembled like leaves in a storm. 53 missed calls, 82 text messages, all from Julian and Chloe, each one more desperate, more furious, more accusatory than the last. I opened the conversations and started reading from the beginning, from the exact moment everything started to collapse for them. The first messages were from Julian asking where I was, saying that the guests were arriving and they needed the food urgently. Then came Chloe's, accusing me of being childish, of making an unnecessary drama, ordering me to stop the stupidity and return immediately to cook. Later, when it was clear I was not coming back, Julian wrote that people were leaving, that I had made them look like idiots in front of all their important friends. Chloe complained bitterly that her parents had come from out of town specifically for this dinner, and they had to order pizza. Pizza, as if that were the worst tragedy in the universe. The last messages were even worse, more venomous. Julian accusing me of ruining his reputation, of being selfish, of thinking only of myself, as always. Chloe saying she hoped I was very proud of having destroyed her perfect party. And finally, Julian threatening to call the police if I did not respond in the next hour, as if I were a fugitive criminal. I read each message 2, 3 times. In none of them, absolutely none, was there an apology. Not a single word of sincere regret, not an acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, they had done something wrong. Only concern for the humiliation they suffered, for social appearances, for their public image. Not once did they ask how I felt, why I had left, if I was emotionally hurt or needed help. Do you see anything interesting there? Eleanor asked, observing my expression. They are furious because I humiliated them in front of their guests, because they looked bad socially, because they had to order cheap pizza instead of serving my gourmet food. Pizza for 30 people must have cost about $300 easily, Eleanor commented with an ironic smile. What a terrible tragedy for them. Eleanor, there is not a single apology in all these messages. Not one. And does that really surprise you at this point? The brutal truth was that it did not surprise me at all. Deep in my heart, I knew exactly who my son was and what kind of man he had become. I had known for years, but I chose to ignore it deliberately, making up pathetic excuses to justify the unjustifiable because it was infinitely easier than facing the painful reality. Tomorrow at 9 o'clock sharp we have an appointment with Christopher Sterling, Eleanor said, closing her laptop. He is the best lawyer specializing in financial fraud in the city, maybe the state. I sent him all the documents tonight. He has already reviewed the case preliminarily and wants to talk to you. And what did he think of the case? He said you have an extremely solid case, hard evidence, perfect documentation. But he needs to see you in person, hear your full and detailed version of the facts, and then decide exactly how we are going to proceed strategically. Christopher does not lose cases, Julia. If he agrees to represent you officially, it is because he knows with absolute certainty that he can win. I looked at my phone again. Julian had just sent one more message. He said he needed me to come home immediately, that enough was enough with the tantrum, and that we had to talk like responsible adults to resolve this absurd misunderstanding. Misunderstanding, as if all this were a simple communication error. For the first time in 3 long years, instead of feeling that paralyzing guilt that always dominated me, I felt something completely different. Something cold, calculated, and powerful that grew in my chest like ice spreading relentlessly over a frozen lake. Do you know what hurts the most? I told Eleanor. It is not the stolen money. It is not the fraudulent debts. It is that they really believed, sincerely believed, that they could treat me like this forever. That I was so pathetic, so desperate for their love and approval, that I would endure absolutely any abuse without ever rebelling. And are you going to keep enduring all that? I turned off the phone completely, holding the button until the screen went black, and left it face down on the cold marble counter. No, it is over forever. Eleanor smiled widely and raised her teacup toward me. Then let us toast properly. To the final end of Julia, the suffering martyr, and the glorious beginning of Julia, the woman who will never be stepped on again by anyone. We clinked our cups. The delicate sound of porcelain against porcelain echoed in the silent kitchen like a war bell announcing an imminent battle. Outside, beyond the tall windows, the city was slowly beginning to wake up. The first timid lights of dawn painted the sky in deep shades of orange and violet. A completely new day was beginning. And this time, finally, I was ready to fight with everything I had. The law firm of Christopher Sterling occupied the 15th floor of a glass building in the city's financial district. Eleanor and I arrived 10 minutes before 9 o'clock, enough time for my nerves to multiply by 10. The waiting room had that characteristic smell of money and power, fine leather, imported coffee, and the expensive perfume of the receptionist who greeted us with a perfectly rehearsed professional smile. I told her my name, and my own voice sounded strange to me. Mr. Sterling is expecting you. Please, come this way. She led us down a marble-floored hallway where our steps echoed like drums. The walls were decorated with framed diplomas and photographs of Christopher with important judges, politicians, and business leaders. This man did not play in the minor leagues. Christopher's office was enormous, with windows showing the entire city spreading out like a living map. Behind the solid mahogany desk stood a man about 50 years old, his graying hair perfectly combed back, wearing a dark gray suit that probably cost more than my car, and eyes that analyzed you as if they could read every secret you kept. Julia, he said, standing up to shake my hand. His grip was firm and secure. Eleanor has told me a lot about you. Please, sit down. We settled into the chairs in front of his desk. Christopher opened a thick folder, the same one Eleanor had shown me, but now with more documents, more evidence, more proof of my own destruction. I have reviewed your case thoroughly, Christopher began. His voice was clear and direct, and I must tell you that in my 25 years of practice, I have rarely seen such blatant and documented fraud. Your son and daughter-in-law left a paper trail that a 5-year-old could follow. Is that good or bad? I asked. For you, it is excellent. For them, it is catastrophic. He pulled out several documents and spread them across the desk. We have proven bank fraud, 3 separate instances of identity theft, forgery of signatures on official documents, and best of all, your son Julian committed these frauds while working at the bank. That exponentially aggravates his crime. I felt the air catch in my throat. What does that mean exactly? It means that Julian could not only lose his job, but face federal criminal charges. We could be talking about 5 to 10 years in prison if a prosecutor decides to be aggressive. And believe me, with this much evidence, any prosecutor would want this case on their resume. 10 years. My son could go to prison for 10 years. Christopher must have noticed my expression because his voice softened slightly. Mrs. Mendez, I understand this is difficult. He is your son. But I need you to understand something crucial. They did not think of you when they emptied your accounts, when they ruined your credit, or when they mortgaged your house without your consent. The question you must ask yourself is not whether they deserve consequences, but whether you deserve justice. I looked at Eleanor. She nodded slightly, giving me silent strength. What options do I have? I finally asked. Christopher leaned back in his executive chair, joining his fingertips as if in prayer. Option 1. You file a full criminal complaint. I handle the case, we gather all the evidence formally, and we present it to the district attorney. Julian and Chloe face charges, potentially go to trial, and if found guilty, go to prison. You get back your house, your finances, everything but your relationship with your son is permanently destroyed. The silence in the office was so thick I could feel it pressing against my ears. Option 2, Christopher continued. Private confrontation. I summon them to a meeting here in my office. I present them with all the evidence we have, and I offer them a settlement. They return every cent they stole. They transfer the title of the house completely back to your name with no mortgage. They sign legal documents waiving any future claim to your estate, and you do not file criminal charges. It is faster, cleaner, but perhaps less emotionally satisfying. And if they refuse the settlement? Eleanor asked. Then we go straight to option 1 without mercy. But believe me, when I show them what we have, when they understand they could go to federal prison, they will accept the settlement so fast it will make their heads spin. I stared at the documents scattered across the desk. My life reduced to papers, numbers, and evidence of betrayal. I thought of Julian as a child, when he would hug me before bed and tell me I was the best mom in the world. I thought of how that child had become a man who told me I should work for the food I ate. There is something else you should know, Christopher said, pulling another document from the folder. Your house, the property in your name, has a current market value of approximately $600,000. Julian and Chloe tried to mortgage it for $300,000. Do you know what they needed that money for? I shook my head. Gambling debts. Julian owes $180,000 to a private casino. He is 2 months behind on payments. The casino is threatening legal action. That is why the mortgage was so urgent. $180,000 in gambling debts. My son was a compulsive gambler, and I did not even know it. And Chloe, compulsive shopping. We have records of $52,000 in purchases of clothes and jewelry in the last 6 months. All on the cards they opened in your name. Christopher closed the folder and looked me directly in the eyes. Mrs. Mendez, these people are not your family right now. They are criminals who are systematically destroying you. The question you must answer today, right now, is simple. How far are you willing to go to get your life back? Christopher's phone rang. His secretary announced something. He raised a finger, asking for a moment, and answered briefly before hanging up. Interesting, he said with a smile that did not reach his eyes. It seems your son Julian just called my office, asking if you were here. We told him we could neither confirm nor deny the presence of any client. He was furious. How did he know I was here? He probably hired someone to follow you. Or maybe he tracked your phone if he has access to your account. These are desperate measures from desperate people. Eleanor leaned forward. Christopher, we need to move this fast. If Julian suspects Julia is taking legal action, he might try to hide assets or destroy evidence. I agree. That is why I need a decision today. Now. Christopher looked at me with that intensity he probably used in court to intimidate witnesses. What are you going to do, Mrs. Mendez? Option 1 or option 2? My hands trembled in my lap. I could feel the weight of the decision like a mountain on my shoulders, sending my son to prison or giving him one last chance to redeem himself. But then I remembered his words. Earn the food you eat. I remembered Chloe's laughter, the years of humiliation, the nights crying in silence while they slept peacefully after destroying my dignity. Option 2, I said finally, surprised by the firmness in my own voice, but with one additional condition. Tell me. I want them to understand exactly what they did. I want them to sit in this office and hear every detail of their crimes. I want to see their faces when they realize they were inches away from going to prison. And I want them to know it was their own mother who decided not to destroy them completely, not because they deserve it, but because I am a better person than they are. Christopher smiled, this time genuinely. Mrs. Mendez, I think you and I are going to work very well together. Christopher scheduled the meeting for 2 days later, a Friday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Enough time to prepare every detail, every document, and every word that would be said in that encounter that would change everything forever. Meanwhile, I still did not answer any calls from Julian or Chloe. Silence was my most powerful weapon, and they were desperate. I stayed those 2 days at Eleanor's apartment, but I was not idle for a single moment. Christopher asked me to write a detailed timeline of the last 3 years, every incident of abuse, every humiliation, every time they treated me like a servant in my own house. It was 18 handwritten pages that took me hours to complete, and with every word I wrote, I felt as if I were drawing venom from an infected wound. Eleanor, for her part, became my personal guardian. She did not leave me alone for a second, as if she feared that at any moment I might weaken and run back to that house where I had been trampled for so long. "Are you afraid of going back?" she asked me one night while we ate dinner. She had prepared pasta with homemade tomato sauce, simple but delicious. "I am not afraid of going back," I replied after thinking about it. "I am afraid of not being strong enough to stand firm when I see Julian. He is still my son, Eleanor, no matter what he has done. A mother's love does not mean accepting abuse, Julia. It means doing the right thing, even when it hurts." Those words echoed in my head for hours. Friday arrived faster than I expected. I dressed carefully that morning, choosing a dark green dress I had bought years ago when I was still Chef Julia Mendez. I put on light makeup and styled my hair in an elegant bun. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman I had forgotten existed, dignified, strong, and deserving of respect. "You look beautiful," Eleanor said when I came down. "You look like the Julia I met 20 years ago." We arrived at Christopher's firm at 3:30. He was waiting for us with another man he introduced as his partner, William Torres, a criminal law specialist. William's presence made the message clear. This was not just a civil matter. There were real criminal ramifications. "Are you ready?" Christopher asked as he checked the documents one last time. Everything was organized in labeled folders: bank fraud, identity theft, forgery of documents, fraudulent debts. "Ready," I answered, though my heart was beating so hard I thought everyone could hear it. "Remember the plan," Christopher said. "I lead the conversation. You remain silent unless I ask you something directly. Do not let yourself be provoked by anything they say. Maintain your composure, no matter what. Your silence is power." At 4 o'clock sharp, the secretary announced that Julian and Chloe had arrived. Christopher waited 5 full minutes before letting them in another power play, making them wait, making them nervous. When they finally walked in, I could hardly breathe. Julian looked terrible. Deep, dark circles under his eyes, wrinkled clothes, messy hair. He had aged 10 years in 2 days. Chloe, on the other hand, was dressed as if for a gala, a cream-colored dress, high heels, perfect makeup. But her eyes gave her away immediately when she saw me. There was surprise, fury, and something else I could not identify. "Mom," Julian said, trying to approach me. Christopher held up a hand, stopping him. "Mr. Mendez, sit down. Both of you, sit in front of the desk." Julian looked at me, searching for some sign, some indication that this was all a misunderstanding we could fix. I kept my face completely neutral, as Christopher had taught me. No emotion, no weakness. They sat down. Chloe crossed her legs with that air of superiority she always wore like perfume. Julian twisted his hands nervously. "Thank you for coming," Christopher began in a cold, professional voice. "My name is Christopher Sterling. I am the attorney for Mrs. Julia Mendez. To my right is my partner, William Torres, a criminal law specialist. We are here to discuss several very serious legal matters that involve you directly." What are you talking about? Chloe asked, with that condescending tone I knew so well. Why does my mother-in-law need lawyers? What lies have they put in her head? Christopher completely ignored her comment and opened the first folder. Let us start with the basic facts. Mr. Julian Mendez, you applied for a loan of $120,000 from the National Bank 2 months ago. In that application, you stated under oath that your monthly salary is $12,000. That is correct. Julian turned pale. That was a mistake on the form. A mistake, Christopher repeated with a smile that was not at all friendly. An $8,000 mistake? Because your real verified salary is $4,200 a month. Here I have your official income report from your own bank's Human Resources Department. He placed the document in front of Julian. My son looked at it without touching it, as if it would burn him. That is bank fraud, Mr. Mendez. A federal crime. 5 to 10 years in prison. The silence that followed was so thick it could be cut with a knife. Chloe stopped crossing her legs. Julian had gone completely still. Now let us talk about you, Mrs. Chloe, Christopher continued, turning toward her. You opened 3 credit cards using the name, identification, and social security number of Mrs. Julia Mendez. Here are the applications. This is your forged signature on each one. He placed the copies in front of her. Even from where I was sitting, I could see the signatures were obviously different from mine. Identity theft. Forgery of documents. Another 5 to 10 years. Chloe finally lost her composure. This is ridiculous. She lives in our house. She gave us permission for everything. Do you have that authorization in writing? William asked, speaking for the first time. Chloe opened her mouth, but no sound came out. You do not have it because it never existed, Christopher continued. And there is more. Much more, Mr. Mendez. Do you want to explain to your mother about your gambling debts? The $180,000 you owe to the Royal Private Casino? Or would you prefer I do it? Julian finally looked at me, his eyes full of tears. Mom, I can explain everything. I had some bad luck, but I can fix it. I just need time. Time is up, Christopher said sharply. And Mrs. Chloe, let us talk about the $52,000 in luxury purchases. Cartier, Gucci, Prada, all charged to the cards you opened fraudulently. How do you explain that? Chloe shot me a look of pure hatred. She never used her credit. It was going to waste. We just took advantage of it. Took advantage, Christopher repeated slowly. What an interesting word to describe a federal crime. Julian stood up suddenly. Enough! Mom, please, tell them to stop this. We are your family. Are you really going to send us to prison? Christopher looked at him harshly. Sit down. Now. Julian sat, visibly trembling. Here is the real situation, Christopher said, gathering all the folders into a perfect pile. We have irrefutable evidence of multiple federal crimes. If we present this to the district attorney tomorrow morning, you will both be arrested before Monday. This is not a threat. It is legal reality. The silence fell over the office again like a heavy, suffocating blanket. Christopher let the silence linger for several more seconds, letting the weight of his words crush Julian and Chloe. I remained seated, motionless, watching reality finally begin to sink in on their faces. Chloe had completely lost that mask of superiority. Julian had tears streaming down his cheeks. However, Christopher finally continued, opening a different folder. My client, despite everything you did to her, still has something you clearly lost a long time ago: compassion. Julian jerked his head up, his eyes shining with sudden hope. Mom, I knew you. Silence. Christopher interrupted him, his voice sharp as glass. I am not talking to you. I am talking to criminals, not your son. And until you have fully heard what I have to say, you will keep your mouths shut. Chloe clenched her fists in her lap but wisely said nothing. Mrs. Mendez has authorized me to present you with a one-time offer. A settlement that will prevent you from going to federal prison, losing your jobs, and completely destroying your lives. But this settlement has very specific terms that you will follow to the letter, without discussion or negotiation. Understood. Both nodded like wind-up dolls. Christopher pulled several documents from the folder and placed them on the desk with surgical precision. 1. You will return every cent you stole, the full $230,000. You have 30 days to get the money. I do not care if you sell your cars, if you ask relatives for loans, or if you pawn every expensive piece of jewelry you bought with stolen money. 30 days, not 1 day more. Julian opened his mouth to protest, but William stopped him with a look. 2. The house you currently occupy, the property that is legally in Mrs. Julia Mendez's name, will be transferred completely back to her without any mortgage, any lien, or any debt attached. You have 2 weeks to completely vacate the property. You will take only your personal belongings. No furniture, no appliances, nothing that was bought with Mrs. Mendez's money. 2 weeks? Chloe screamed, finally losing control. Where are we supposed to live? That is impossible. You should have thought of that before committing federal fraud, William replied coldly. Next, Christopher continued, relentless. 3. You will sign legal documents permanently waiving any future claim to Mrs. Mendez's estate. You will inherit nothing. You cannot request anything. You have no legal right to anything she owns now or in the future. If she dies tomorrow, you will not receive a single cent. You are completely disinherited. Julian sobbed openly now. Mom, please, you cannot do this. I am your only son, your only family. For the first time in the entire meeting, Christopher looked at me directly, giving me silent permission to speak if I wanted to. I breathed deeply and finally opened my mouth. You stopped being my family the day you told me I should work for the food I eat, I said in a calm but firm voice. At that moment, I became nothing to you. Now you are receiving the same treatment. Julian got up from his chair and fell to his knees in front of me. Mom, I am sorry. I am so sorry. I was stressed. I had debts. I was not thinking clearly. But I can change. I promise you, I can change. Your promises are worthless, Christopher intervened, making Julian return to his chair. Point 4. Mr. Mendez will voluntarily resign from his position at the bank before the end of this week. If he does not, we will present evidence of fraud to his employer and he will be fired for cause, which means no severance and a destroyed work record. Would you prefer to resign with dignity or be kicked out as a criminal? Julian buried his face in his hands. His banking career, 15 years of climbing the ladder, all destroyed in an instant. Point 5, Christopher continued, looking specifically at Chloe. You will immediately close all fraudulent credit cards and personally assume the full debt. $52,000 are in your name now. Mrs. Mendez has already filed formal disputes with the credit companies. Once approved, all that debt will be legally transferred to you. Chloe was so pale she looked ready to faint. I do not have $52,000. I have nothing. Then I suggest you start selling all those luxury purchases you made, William replied, without any sympathy. eBay, consignment shops, pawn shops. How you resolve it is not our problem. Christopher pulled out one last document, thicker than the others. And finally, point 6. Both of you will sign a full confession of all crimes committed. This confession will remain sealed in a safe in my custody. If you ever, for any reason, breach any point of this agreement or attempt to contact, harass, threaten, or bother Mrs. Mendez in any way, that confession will be immediately handed over to the district attorney and you will face full criminal charges. No warnings, no second chances. He placed the document in front of them along with 2 pens. You have 5 minutes to decide. Sign this agreement right now, in this office, or we all walk out of here together and head straight to the district attorney's office. You choose 30 days of discomfort or 10 years in federal prison. Julian took the pen with trembling hands. He looked at Chloe, who was crying now, her perfect makeup running down her cheeks in black lines. Then he looked at me, searching one last time for any sign that this was just a nightmare, that his mother would save him, as she always had. But I said nothing. I kept my face neutral and my posture dignified. This time, there would be no rescue. This time, they would face the consequences of their actions. If I sign this, Julian said in a broken voice, will I at least be able to talk to you? To see you? To be your son again someday? Christopher looked at me, leaving the answer to my discretion. I thought about my words carefully before speaking. If you sign this and follow every point to the letter, If in a year you prove to me that you have really changed, that you have sought help for your gambling addiction, that you have become a man of honor, then maybe we can talk. Maybe. But I promise you nothing, Julian. I owe you nothing anymore." Something died in his eyes when he heard those words. The last hope went out like a candle in the wind. He signed the document. His signature was so shaky it was barely legible, but it was valid. Chloe took longer. She looked at the document as if it were a death sentence, reading every line, searching for a legal loophole that did not exist. Finally, with a choked sob, she also signed. Christopher collected the documents immediately and put them in his briefcase. "William will witness these signatures, and we will notarize them this afternoon. Certified copies will be sent to you first thing tomorrow morning. The clock starts now. 30 days for the money. 2 weeks to vacate the house. 1 week for the job resignation." He stood up, ending the meeting. "You may leave, and I strongly suggest you do not attempt to contact Mrs. Mendez by any means. I will be monitoring any communication. 1 single call, 1 single message, and this agreement is automatically canceled." Julian stood up wobbling, as if his legs could barely hold him. Chloe followed, her high heels clicking against the marble floor as they walked toward the door. At the threshold, Julian turned one last time. "Mom, Goodbye, Julian," I said simply. The door closed behind them with a soft click that sounded like the closing of an entire chapter of my life. Christopher waited 30 full seconds before smiling broadly. "Mrs. Mendez, you just won. Completely." But I did not feel victory. I only felt an enormous void where my mother's heart had once been. Eleanor took my hand and squeezed it hard. "You did well," she whispered. "The hard part is over," but we both knew that was a lie. The hard part was just beginning. The following days passed in a strange haze. I stayed at Eleanor's apartment, waiting for Julian and Chloe to begin fulfilling the terms of the agreement. Christopher called me twice a day with updates. Julian had submitted his formal resignation to the bank, and Chloe had started selling her jewelry at a downtown pawn shop. They had hired a moving company for the upcoming weekend. Everything was happening exactly as we had planned, but I felt strangely empty, as if I had won a battle but lost something bigger in the process. "It is normal to feel this way," Eleanor told me one night as we drank wine on her balcony. The city stretched out before us, millions of lights shining in the dark. "You set boundaries for the first time in your life. That hurts even when it is the right thing to do. Does it ever stop hurting? I do not know. But I know that eventually, the pain becomes smaller than your recovered dignity." On the 8th day after the meeting, Christopher called me with unexpected news. "Julia, I need you to come to my office immediately. Something has come up that you must see." I arrived 40 minutes later, with Eleanor at my side, as always. Christopher was waiting for us with a serious expression, more serious than usual. On his desk were a large manila envelope and an open laptop. "What happened?" I asked, feeling my stomach tighten. "Sit down first." His tone scared me. I sat. Eleanor stood behind me, a protective hand on my shoulder. "This morning I received a call from the fraud department of the bank where Julian worked," Christopher began. "Apparently, during a routine audit triggered after his resignation, they discovered additional irregularities in his work accounts." "What kind of irregularities?" Christopher opened the envelope and pulled out several printed documents. Julian had access to the accounts of the bank's premium clients. Over the last 18 months, he made small but constant transfers from inactive accounts to an offshore account he controlled. Amounts between $500 and $2,000 each time, small enough not to trigger automatic alarms. The world began to spin around me. How much did he steal in total? About $340,000. The number hit me like a punch to the stomach. My son had not just stolen from me. He had stolen from the bank, from innocent clients. He was a real criminal, not just someone who had made bad decisions. "The bank will file criminal charges," Christopher continued. "There is no way to avoid it. This is no longer in our hands or Julian's. It is an automatic federal case. Large-scale bank fraud. How much prison time?" My voice sounded hollow, distant. "With this amount and the abuse of a position of trust, we are talking a minimum of 10 to 15 years. Eleanor squeezed my shoulder harder. I could not breathe properly. "There is more," Christopher said, turning the laptop toward me. One of the clients whose account was drained is Ernesto Villarreal. The name sounded familiar, but I could not place it. Who is he? Ernesto Villarreal owns the largest restaurant chain in the region, 15 establishments. He is also known for having connections with very dangerous people who do not resolve problems through lawyers. Fear shot through me like electricity. Are you saying Julian is in danger? I am saying that when Villarreal discovers who stole $80,000 from his personal account, he is going to want more than legal justice. And we have documented evidence connecting everything directly to Julian. I stood up from the chair abruptly. We have to warn him. No matter what he has done, he is still my son. I cannot leave him. Julia, Eleanor interrupted me firmly. Listen to what you are saying. After everything he did to you, you still want to protect him. He is my son, I shouted, surprised by my own vehemence. I cannot let him die. Christopher stood and walked to the window, looking at the city. I already contacted Julian this morning. I informed him about the bank's charges and about Villarreal. His reaction was, interesting. What did he say? Christopher turned to look at me directly. He said this was your fault. That if you had not forced him to resign from the bank, he would have had time to return the money without anyone noticing. That you ruined his only chance to fix things. Then he hung up. The words pierced me like bullets. Even now, on the brink of total destruction, Julian was still blaming me. Chloe called too, Christopher continued. She wants to renegotiate the agreement. She says circumstances have changed and they need more time and more financial help from you. I laughed. It was a bitter, painful laugh, without joy. Of course they want more. They always want more. I told them the agreement was final and non-negotiable, Christopher said. But there is one more thing you should know, Julia, and you are not going to like it. What else could there be? Christopher pulled out his phone and showed me a social media page. It was a profile I did not recognize at first, but then I saw the photos. Chloe had created a public page called Justice for Julian, where she was telling a completely distorted version of events. I read the posts with growing horror. According to Chloe, I was an abusive mother-in-law who had kicked my son out of his home because of jealousy toward his wife. I had supposedly made up false charges with the help of corrupt lawyers. Julian was the victim of a family conspiracy orchestrated by me and Eleanor, who had supposedly brainwashed me. She has 200 followers already, Christopher said. And it is growing. Some people are sharing the story, leaving messages of support for Julian. Can she do that? Is it legal? Technically, yes, under freedom of speech. But if she keeps defaming you, we can file a defamation lawsuit. The problem is, that would keep this whole matter in the public eye for months. I sat back down, feeling that my legs could no longer support me. In 1 week, I had gone from being a silent victim to being a public villain. Chloe was using social media to create a narrative where she and Julian were the persecuted heroes. What should I do? I asked, looking at Christopher and then Eleanor. Nothing, Eleanor replied firmly. You do not feed the trolls. You do not respond to lies. You let the truth come out eventually in court when Julian faces the bank's charges. Eleanor is right, Christopher added. Any public response from you will only escalate the situation. Besides, when the bank's criminal charges become public, Chloe's narrative will collapse on its own. No one is going to believe you are a villain when Julian is arrested for stealing $340,000. When will that be? The FBI is building the case now. They will likely issue an arrest warrant in 2 or 3 weeks. 2 or 3 weeks. That was the time Julian had before his world was completely destroyed. There is one last thing, Christopher said, pulling out another document. The house, Julian and Chloe have 5 more days to completely vacate it. After that, you can technically return whenever you want. What are you going to do? The house. My house. The place where I had raised Julian, where I had lived so many years of happiness before everything turned toxic. Did I want to go back there? Could I go back there? I do not know, I admitted honestly. Every corner of that house has memories. Some good, but most are bad now. You do not have to decide today, Eleanor said softly. You can stay with me as long as you need. Christopher closed his laptop and gathered the documents. Julia, I know this feels overwhelming. I know you wanted simple and clean justice, but life rarely works that way. The important thing is that you maintained your dignity, set boundaries, and protected yourself. Julian made his own decisions, decisions that led him much further than you or I imagined. But those are his consequences, not yours. I nodded, though his words brought little comfort. That night, back in Eleanor's apartment, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror for a long time. The woman looking back at me from the reflection had aged years in weeks. She had new lines around her eyes, more visible gray in her hair, and a sadness in her gaze that had not been there before. But there was also something else. There was strength. There was recovered dignity. There was a woman who had finally said enough. And that, I thought as I turned off the light, would have to be enough. 12 days after the meeting at Christopher's firm, I received the keys to my house. Julian and Chloe had vacated the property one day before the deadline, leaving everything exactly as the agreement specified: the furniture, the appliances, everything except their personal belongings. Christopher had sent an inspector to verify there was no intentional damage or theft. Everything was in order, although the house felt strangely empty, according to the report. "Are you ready to go back?" Eleanor asked me that morning over breakfast. It had been nearly 3 weeks since I walked out the back door of my own kitchen. "I do not know, but I cannot stay here forever taking advantage of your hospitality. You are not a burden, Julia. You never have been. But we both knew I needed to face that house eventually. It was mine, legally and morally. I was not going to let the ghosts of Julian and Chloe steal my home as well." We arrived in the mid-morning. Eleanor insisted on coming with me, bringing a bottle of wine and fresh flowers to give the place new life. When I opened the front door, the smell hit me immediately, a mixture of Chloe's cheap perfume, stale food, and something else I could not identify. The living room was exactly as I remembered it, but it felt different. The furniture was in place, the curtains were still hanging, but there was a sense of abandonment, as if the house itself knew it had been the setting for so much cruelty. I walked slowly through each room. The dining room where I had served thousands of meals while they barely looked at me. The living room where Chloe sat like a queen while I cleaned. The hallway where I had heard their mocking laughter so many times. And finally, the kitchen. My kitchen. I stopped at the threshold. The pots were still on the stove, exactly where I had left them 3 weeks ago. No one had moved them. Inside were remains of rotting food. The smell was nauseating. The appetizers I had been preparing were still on the island, now covered in green mold. "They left everything rotting," Eleanor said behind me, her voice full of indignation. "They did it on purpose." One last act of contempt. She was probably right. But as I looked at that mess, I felt something unexpected: laughter. I started to laugh, softly at first, then louder, until tears were running down my cheeks. "Julia?" Eleanor looked at me worriedly. "Are you okay?" "It is perfect," I said between laughs. "It is absolutely perfect. They left the evidence of their own stupidity rotting here as a symbol of who they really are." Eleanor started laughing too, and soon we were both laughing hysterically in the middle of that ruined kitchen. It was laughter of liberation, of survival, of women who had gone through hell and come out the other side. "Well," Eleanor said finally, wiping her eyes, "let us clean up this mess and reclaim your space." We spent the next 4 hours cleaning. We threw away all the rotting food, washed the pots, and disinfected every surface. Eleanor had brought professional cleaning products from the restaurant, the same ones they used in commercial kitchens. Gradually, the horrible smell vanished, replaced by the fresh scent of lemon and lavender. While we worked, my phone rang. It was Christopher. "Julia, I need to give you an update. The FBI issued the arrest warrant for Julian this morning. They took him into custody 2 hours ago." I dropped the sponge I was holding. "He is in jail now?" "Yes. His bail hearing is tomorrow. Given the amount of money involved and the flight risk, it is likely they will not grant bail, or it will be extremely high." "How much?" "Probably between $500,000 and $1 million. $1 million. Julian had no access to that kind of money, especially after having to pay me back the $230,000 from the settlement. And Chloe? She does not face charges from the bank because she did not work there. Only Julian. But she is desperate. She has already called my office 3 times today, asking to speak with you." What does she want? She wants you to pay Julian's bail. She says you are his mother, and it is your responsibility to help him. She says if you do not, his blood will be on your hands, that prisoners attack former bank employees in jail. She is using pure emotional manipulation. I closed my eyes, breathing deeply. What should I do? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Julian is an adult who committed serious crimes. The consequences are his. You already did more than you had to by not filing charges for what they did to you. I hung up the phone, feeling strangely calm. Eleanor looked at me with concern, but I simply shook my head. I will tell you later. Let us keep cleaning. We continued cleaning. When we finished with the kitchen, we moved to the rest of the house. In the bedroom Julian and Chloe had used, we found something unexpected, a shoebox hidden in the back of the closet. Eleanor opened it, and we both stared at the contents in silence. Inside were receipts, hundreds of receipts for luxury purchases, all made with the credit cards they had opened in my name. Dresses for $5,000, bags for $10,000, incredibly expensive jewelry. There were also tickets from the casino, where Julian had lost obscene amounts in a single night. One showed a loss of $42,000 in 6 hours. Why would they keep this? Eleanor asked. It is direct evidence against them. Arrogance? I replied. They never thought they would get caught. They never believed I would have the courage to face them. At the bottom of the box was something else, a notebook. I opened it with trembling hands. It was Chloe's journal. The first entries were from 3 years ago, right when she started dating Julian. I began to read, and with every page, I felt more nauseous. Met Julian today. He is perfect. He has a weak mother who does everything he says. It will be easy to control them both. Julian introduced me to his pathetic mother. Her name is Julia. She cooks well, but she is a fool. She will serve me perfectly. Moved into Julia's house. Julian says it will eventually be ours when she dies. In the meantime, we will treat her like a servant. It is what she deserves for being so submissive. Opened another credit card with Julia's information. It is so easy. She does not even check her statements. Bought that cream dress I wanted. Julian says I look beautiful. Page after page of calculated cruelty, deliberate manipulation, and absolute contempt. It was not just casual abuse. It was a meticulously executed plan to destroy me and steal everything I had. Julia, stop reading that, Eleanor said, trying to take the notebook from me. It is only hurting you more. But I continued until the last entry, dated 2 days before I left. Julia is being especially irritating lately. I think she suspects something. Julian says we have to be more careful. But honestly, even if she discovers everything, what is she going to do? She is a pathetic old woman with no one but us. She does not have the courage to leave us. She belongs to us. I closed the notebook, feeling something crystallize inside me. It was not anger. It was not sadness. It was absolute clarity. I have to take this to Christopher, I said. This notebook changes everything. Why? They already signed the settlement. Because this proves premeditation. Chloe documented her plan to defraud me from the beginning. This turns everything into organized criminal conspiracy, not just impulsive bad decisions. Christopher can use this to ensure they face the maximum consequences. Eleanor smiled slowly. Sometimes people's arrogance is their own destruction. That night, after Eleanor left, I stayed alone in my house for the first time in 3 weeks. I walked through each room slowly, reclaiming my space, energetically cleansing every corner of their toxic presence. In the kitchen, I made tea and sat at the table where I had served so many ignored meals. But this time was different. This time the house was only mine. Every plate, every cup, every space was mine to do with as I pleased. My phone vibrated a message from an unknown number. Mom, please, I am in jail. I am scared. I need you. Please help me. I love you. I read the message 3 times. Then I blocked the number. Some doors, once closed, are never opened again. 6 months later, my life was unrecognizable in the best way possible. The house had been completely transformed. I hired designers who removed every trace of Julian and Chloe's presence. I painted the walls in a warm ivory, changed the furniture for pieces I chose myself, and installed a new professional-grade kitchen that would have made any chef cry with envy. This space now breathed peace, creativity, and dignity. Eleanor convinced me to return to the culinary world, but on my own terms. I did not want the pressure of a full restaurant, so we created something different: private cooking classes for small groups. Twice a week, 8 people would come to my house, and I would teach them to prepare gourmet dishes while we shared stories and wine. The response was overwhelming. I had a 3-month waiting list. I also started an online channel called Cooking with Dignity, where I shared recipes but also talked about setting boundaries, recognizing toxic relationships, and reclaiming your self-worth. The channel grew faster than I ever imagined. 150,000 subscribers in 4 months. People resonated with my story, especially older women who felt invisible and ignored by their own families. Christopher called me in March with news about Julian. The trial had been quick. With all the evidence from the bank and Chloe's journal proving premeditation, Julian accepted a plea deal to avoid a long public trial. 12 years in federal prison. Chloe received 5 years as an accomplice and for the identity theft charges. "How do you feel?" Christopher asked me after giving me the news. "Sad," I admitted honestly, but also relieved. I no longer have to worry about them showing up at my door. Julian wrote to me from prison twice. The first letter was full of apologies, promises of change, and pleas for forgiveness. The second was furious, blaming me again, saying I had abandoned him when he needed me most. I did not respond to either. I simply kept them in a drawer as evidence of who he really was. Chloe tried something different. She sold her story to a sensationalist TV show, painting herself as the victim of a manipulative husband and a vengeful mother-in-law. The interview was pathetic. She cried on camera and played the role of the betrayed wife perfectly. Some people believed her, but most did not, because by then my own channel had grown so much that my version of the story, backed by legal documents and the journal she wrote herself, was better known. The public narrative naturally tilted in my favor. One May afternoon, while preparing artisan bread dough in my renovated kitchen, the doorbell rang. I was not expecting anyone. My classes were on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and today was Sunday. I opened the door and found a young woman, maybe 25 years old, with a baby in her arms. "Mrs. Mendez?" she asked timidly. "Yes. Can I help you?" "My name is Yolanda. I am. Well, I was Julian's girlfriend before Chloe. He and I were together for 3 years. The world tilted slightly. I did not know Julian had had a serious girlfriend before Chloe. He never mentioned it. We broke up when he started changing, when he started gambling compulsively and lying about money. She shifted the baby in her arms. But there is something you need to know. This is Sophie, your granddaughter." The air left my lungs. "What?" "Sophie is 2 years old. Julian is her father. I tried to tell him when I got pregnant, but he said I was lying, that the baby was not his. He blocked me everywhere. He never met his daughter." I looked at the little girl. She had Julian's eyes and the same nose shape as my family. There was no doubt. "Why are you coming to tell me this now?" Yolanda took a deep breath. "Because I saw your channel. I saw your story, and I realized you knew nothing about us. Julian erased us completely from his life, as if we never existed. I thought you deserved to know you have a granddaughter." Tears began to roll down my cheeks without permission. A granddaughter, a small, innocent life who was not to blame for her father's crimes. "Do you want to come in?" I asked in a broken voice. We spent 3 hours talking. Yolanda told me about her relationship with Julian, how charming he had been at first, but how he slowly became controlling and dishonest. How, when she discovered his gambling problems and tried to help him, he accused her of being controlling and ended the relationship. How when she got pregnant and told him, he simply denied everything and vanished. "I never asked anything of him," Yolanda explained. "I grew up without a father and survived. I thought Sophie and I would be fine alone, but when I saw your story online, I thought maybe you would want to be part of her life. If not, I completely understand." I looked at Sophie, who was playing quietly with a toy on my living room floor. She was perfect, innocent, and deserving of the love her father never gave her. "I would love to," I said simply. Yolanda smiled, crying now too. "Really? Truly? Truly. But under one condition, we will never speak ill of Julian in front of her. When she is older and asks questions, We will tell her the truth appropriate for her age. But we will not fill her childhood with poison. I agree. That night, after Yolanda and Sophie left with promises to return soon, I sat in my kitchen with a hot cup of tea. The irony was not lost on me. Julian had tried to take everything from me, my money, my house, my dignity. But in the end, his own actions had given me something he never could. A real family based on mutual respect and genuine love. My phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number. I heard you met my daughter. You have no right. She is my family. It was Julian. He had found a way to contact me from prison. I read the message once, then blocked the number without responding. Sophie ran toward me laughing, her little arms outstretched. I picked her up, and she hugged me with that pure trust only children have. "Grandma," she said, in her sweet little voice. It was the first time she had called me that. My heart filled with something I had forgotten, pure joy, without complications, without conditions. This was my family now. This was my life. And no one, absolutely no one, would ever take it from me again. Months later, on the first anniversary of my channel, I received a message that changed everything again. But that, as they say, is a story for another day. Because some stories do not end. They simply transform into new beginnings. And I was finally ready for mine.